I gave him everything, my time, my love, my life. And still it was never enough. I raised him alone, I sacrificed endlessly. Yet one day I realized I had become invisible in my own home. She smiled politely at me, my own daughter-in-law, and told me to give them space, as if I didn't belong anymore. Every meal I cooked, every word I whispered, every tear I held back, it still wasn't enough for them. I stayed quiet, I gave my all, but the hardest truth hit me one day. I was no longer seen, no longer needed. I loved him without limit, yet one simple sentence broke me. "Mom, please give us some space." When my daughter-in-law told me to leave the room, I smiled instead of crying. I do not know why I smiled. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was survival, or maybe I had already learned that my tears no longer mattered in my own home. I remember the exact moment. The clock on the wall was ticking too loudly. The tea in my cup had gone cold. And Sana stood there, not angry, not loud, just calm in a way that hurts more than shouting ever could. She said, "Mom, we need some space. Please understand." Space. Such a soft word. Such a sharp meaning. I nodded, I picked up my shawl. And I walked away as if I had not given my whole life to this house. That night, I sat alone on my bed and asked myself a question I had never dared to ask before. How did I become a guest in the home I built with my own hands? No matter what I gave, it was never enough. I raised my son, Saad, with love that had no limits. I gave him my youth, my strength, my sleep, my prayers. When his father passed away, I became both mother and father. I did not complain, I did not count my sacrifices. I believed love was enough. But love, I would later learn, does not always protect you. Saad was my whole world. When he was small, he held my finger when he slept. When he was sick, I stayed awake all night. When he was scared, he ran to me. That I thought that bond would never change. I was wrong. Marriage does not only bring a new person into the house. Sometimes, it quietly moves the old one out. When Saad married Sana, I welcomed her with an open heart. I told myself she was like my own daughter. I wanted peace, I wanted harmony, I wanted my son to be happy. I cooked her favorite meals, I adjusted my routine, I softened my voice, I stepped back when needed. Still, something was always missing. I gave respect, that I gave understanding, that I gave silence, that I gave space. But no matter what I gave, it was never enough. At first, it was small things. Whispers in the kitchen that stopped when I entered. Plans made without telling me. Decisions taken over my head. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself to be patient. After all, mothers are taught to disappear quietly. One evening I heard Sana say to Saad, "We need privacy." She did not know I was listening. Her voice was not cruel, it was confident. And Saad said nothing. That silence broke something inside me. I did not want to be chosen over her, I only wanted to matter. That night, I cried without sound. I pressed my pillow against my face so no one would hear it. I cried for the woman I used to be. The woman who was once the center of her son's world. Now I was an extra. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. I started spending more time alone. I ate meals earlier. I stayed in my room longer. I did not want to disturb their peace. Funny thing is, the more invisible I became, the more comfortable everyone seemed. Sana was polite. Always polite. But politeness can be a wall. She called me mom, but her eyes never met mine. She thanked me, but she did not need me. She smiled, but there was distance. And Saad, my Saad. He was kind. But kindness without presence feels empty. He would say, "Mom, you're overthinking." He would say, "Please adjust." He would say, "Things change." Change. Another soft word. Another sharp meaning. I changed my expectations, that I changed my boundaries, that I changed myself. Still, it was never enough. The house felt different. The walls were the same, but the warmth was gone. Laughter sounded forced, silence felt heavy. Sometimes I stood in the kitchen and remembered the days when Saad used to sit there, talking non-stop. Now, meals were quiet. Phones were more important than faces. I wondered when my voice stopped mattering. One afternoon, it rained heavily. I stood by the window, watching the water fall. Rain always made me reflective. I realized something painful that day. I had been giving and giving, hoping someone would notice, hoping someone would say, "Mom, we see you." But love should not beg to be seen. That evening, Sana asked me gently if I could move my things from the cupboard. She needed space for her clothes. I smiled again. That smile cost me more than tears ever could. Inside, I whispered the truth I was afraid to say out loud. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. I did not hate Sanat, I did not blame Saad, I blamed myself. Maybe I loved too much. Maybe I expected too little in return. As I lay down that night, staring at the ceiling, one thought echoed in my heart. When did being a mother become a burden instead of a blessing? And why does love hurt the most when it is quiet? I did not tell anyone how lonely I felt. I smiled through it. I cooked, that I cleaned, I prayed, I stayed quiet. Because mothers are taught that silence is strength. But silence has a cost. Every morning I woke up before everyone else. I made breakfast the way Saad liked it when he was young. Soft parathas. Less oil, warm tea. He barely noticed. Sana would thank me politely. She always did. But her thank you felt like a door closing softly. Not slammed, just closed. I would sit at the dining table and watch them talk to each other. They laughed at things I did not understand. They planned things I was not part of. I was there. But not included. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. Sometimes I caught myself waiting for Saad's voice, waiting for him to ask, "Mom, how was your day?" Waiting for him to notice that I was quieter than usual. But days passed. Weeks passed. And my silence blended into the walls. I began to feel like furniture. Useful. Present. But unnoticed. One evening I tried to speak. I do not even remember what I wanted to say. Something small. Something simple. Saad was on his phone. Sana was busied, and my words fell into the space between us and disappeared. I stopped mid-sentence. No one noticed. That moment stayed with me. It is strange how the smallest moments hurt the most. I started eating alone. Not because anyone asked me to. But because it was easier. Easier than sitting at a table where my presence felt optional. At night, I replayed old memories in my head. Saad learning to walk. Saad running into my arms after school. Saad holding my hand when he was afraid. I wondered where that child had gone. Marriage does not change a person overnight. It changes them slowly. Quietly. And one day you wake up and realize you are no longer the center of their world. I tried to remind myself that this was normal. That sons grow up. That daughters-in-law need space. That families change. But understanding something does not stop it from hurting. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. I stopped buying things for myself. That I stopped asking questions. I stopped sharing my feelings. Became careful. Careful not to offend. Careful not to interrupt. Careful not to exist too loudly. That is how invisibility begins. One afternoon, I overheard Sana talking to her mother on the phone. Her voice was soft. Comfortable. She said, "Yes, I'm adjusting." She paused, then she said, "It's fine, Mom is cooperative." Cooperative. Like a task, like a responsibility. I went into my room and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and held my chest. Not because my heart was sick, but because it felt heavy. I realized something that day. I was no longer a person, I was a situation. I still tried, that I still hoped. Hope is a stubborn thing. I told myself that if I just loved harder, things would get better. If I stayed quiet, peace would stay. If I sacrificed a little more, I would still belong. But love should not feel like erasing yourself. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. The house had rules now. Unspoken rules. Knock before entering. Ask before speaking. That do not interfere. Followed them all. Still I felt in the way. One night there was a small argument between Saad and Sana. Not loud. Just tense. I stood in the hallway, unsure of what to do. Old instincts told me to step into comfort to help. But I stayed back. 'Cause I was afraid. Afraid of being blamed. Afraid of being called controlling. Afraid of being told I was crossing boundaries. So I went back to my room. That fear changed me. I was no longer a mother, I was a careful guest. Saad came to my room later, he asked if I was okay. I said yes. I always said yes, because saying no felt dangerous. He sat for a few minutes. Then he left. The door closed quietly. That sound stayed in my ears long after he was gone. I began to understand something painful. Love does not disappear suddenly, it fades when it is no longer nurtured. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. Some nights, I talked to myself, that I whispered my thoughts into the darkness. I asked myself if I had done something wrong, that if I had been too strict, too loving, too present. But mothers are never taught how to stop being mothers. We are only taught how to give. One morning, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My hair had more gray, my eyes looked tired. I asked the woman staring back at me, "Who are you now?" She did not answer. I remembered a time when this house felt alive. When my laughter filled the rooms. When my opinions mattered. Now I walked carefully on the same floors. It felt like I was shrinking. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. The day Sana asked me to leave the room was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no insults. That is what made it hurt more. She said it kindly, politely, as if she were asking for a glass of water. And I agreed, because I had trained myself to agree. As I walked away, I realized something terrifying. I had become so used to being invisible that I accepted it without protest. That night, as I lay in bed, I did not cry loudly, I did not blame anyone. I just felt empty. Empty in a way that words cannot explain. I whispered into the darkness. I gave everything. And the darkness answered with silence. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. Before everything changed, there was a time when this house felt warm. Not perfect, but warm. I still remember the early mornings when Saad was young. The house would wake up slowly. The sound of birds outside. The smell of tea boiling in the kitchen. Back then life was simple, hard yes, but simple. Saad's father passed away when Saad was still a child. I did not have time to fall apart. There was school to manage, meals to cook, bills to pay. I became strong because I had no other choice. Saad became my purpose. Every decision I made was for him. Every sacrifice felt natural. I did not think of myself as brave, I thought of myself as a mother. I worked quietly, that I saved carefully, that I prayed endlessly. And Saad grew up watching all of it. He was a gentle child. Not loud. Not demanding, he listened more than he spoke. Sometimes when I came home tired, he would sit beside me and say, "Mom, are you okay?" Those words gave me strength. As he grew older, he became responsible, he helped around the house, he respected elders. People often told me, "You raised him well." Those words felt like rewards. I believed our bond was unbreakable. I was wrong, but I did not know it then. When Saad told me he wanted to get married, my heart felt two emotions at once. Happiness. And fear. Happiness because every mother wants to see her child settled. Fear because I knew life would change. Still I smiled. I asked him about her, he said her name was Sana. He spoke about her politely. Respectfully. She's understanding, he said. She's calm. I liked the way he spoke about her. There was care in his voice. When I met Sana for the first time, she greeted me with respect. She touched my feet. She smiled softly. She was educated, well-spoken. Quiet in a confident way. I told myself, she will bring peace into this house. I wanted us to be a family. Not a battlefield. During the wedding preparations, I stayed involved but careful. I did not want to control anything. I did not want to be that mother-in-law. I said yes to most things. I stayed quiet where needed. The wedding day came and went. The house filled with guests. Laughter, noise. And then, slowly, everything became quiet again. Sana moved into the house. At first, I tried very hard to make her comfortable. I showed her where everything was, that I adjusted my schedule. I woke up earlier so the kitchen would be free for her. I asked her preferences before cooking. I wanted her to feel at home. She thanked me often. She smiled. She was never rude. But closeness takes more than politeness. I noticed small differences. Our habits were not the same. Our ways of thinking were different. I reminded myself that this was normal. I told myself, she is young. She needs time. Saad seemed happy. That mattered most to me. I watched him change slowly. Not in a bad way, just different. He spent more time in his room, that he shared less with me. I told myself this was part of marriage. Gave them space. Space became distance. Distance became silence. But still I hoped. I remember one evening when we sat together for dinner, it was quiet. I tried to start a conversation. I asked Sana about her day. She answered politely, briefly. Saad checked his phone. The moment passed. I felt something small break inside me, but I ignored it. Hope makes us blind. I thought if I stayed loving, things would grow better with time. If I stayed patient, the bond would form. So I waited. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The house felt organized. Clean. Controlled. But it did not feel warm anymore. Sana managed the house in her own way. I stepped back further. I did not want conflict. I did not want Saad to feel torn between us. So I chose silence. That silence slowly erased me. Sometimes Sana would make decisions without asking me. Furniture moved. Schedules changed. I told myself it was her home too now. Sometimes Saad would take her side without listening fully. Not intentionally. Just naturally. I told myself not to take it personally. But feelings do not listen to logic. I started missing my son even though he lived in the same house. That feeling is hard to explain. One afternoon I was folding clothes when Sana walked in. She hesitated before speaking. "Mom," she said softly, "can we arrange things differently?" Her tone was respectful. But her words made it clear. This was her space now. I agreed. That night I sat alone and realized something painful. I was slowly adjusting myself out of my own life. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. I remembered my own younger days. How I had adjusted. How I had compromised. But I had done it with love around me. Here love felt distant. Saad was not cruel, he was busy, he was distracted. He assumed I was fine. Mothers are expected to be fine. I never wanted to compete with Sana. Never. I only wanted balance. But balance is hard when one side keeps giving. I noticed I was speaking less. Laughing less. Expecting less. I was becoming smaller to fit into their world. That scared me. One evening Saad asked me if I was happy. The question caught me off guard. I smiled and said yes. Because honesty felt dangerous. If I spoke the truth, I feared I would be called emotional. Sensitive. Old-fashioned. So I stayed quiet. Silence became my language. Inside I was slowly breaking. But outwardly everything looked fine. That is how these stories begin. Not with shouting. Not with drama. But with quiet adjustments that slowly erase someone. And still I kept telling myself. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. The change did not come like a storm, it came like dust. Slow. Quiet. Settling everywhere until the air felt heavy. At first I told myself nothing was wrong. Families adjust. People learn. Time heals. But time, I learned, can also widen gaps. I began to notice how carefully I had to choose my words. Every sentence felt like it needed permission. If I suggested something, I watched Sana's face closely. If I spoke too long, I felt Saad grow distant. So I shortened myself. I learned when to stop talking, I learned when to smile, I learned when to disappear. One morning I rearranged the kitchen the way it had always been. Not because I wanted control. Only because it felt familiar. Sana noticed immediately. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply said, "Mom, I prefer things this way." Her voice was calm. Her words were final. He nodded. That small moment stayed with me all day. I was no longer allowed familiarity. I began asking before doing anything. Before cooking. Before cleaning. before inviting relatives. Asking became my habit. Permission became my reality. Saad noticed none of this. Or maybe he did, but he did not know what to do. One evening I tried to explain. I said softly, "Saad, sometimes I feel lost in my own house." He sighed. Not angrily. Tiredly. "Mom," he said, "please don't make things complicated." Complicated. My feelings were now a problem. I stayed quiet after that. The silence between us grew. Meals became shorter. Conversations became formal. Laughter became rare. Sometimes Sana and Saad talked late into the night. I could hear their voices through the wall. Not arguments. Plans. Trips. Decisions. Future. I was not part of that future. I told myself it was normal. Children grow forward. Parents remain behind. Still, the pain did not lessen. One afternoon, relatives visited. I was happy to see familiar faces. But I noticed how Sana stayed close to Saad. How she answered questions meant for me. I smiled through it. But inside I felt replaced. Later that night, I asked Saad gently, "Did I say something wrong today?" He looked surprised. "No, Mom," he said. "Why do you think like that?" "Because I feel invisible," I wanted to say. Instead I smiled and said nothing. That became my pattern. I started questioning myself. Was I interfering? Was I old-fashioned? Was I expecting too much? Self-doubt is a slow poison. It does not kill you at once, that it weakens you quietly. I noticed Sana correcting me more often. Not harshly, but firmly. I noticed Saad agreeing with her automatically. Not because she was right, but because peace was easier that way. And I understood. He was choosing calm over conflict. But calm built on silence is fragile. One day, I cooked Saad's favorite dish that I wanted to remind him of us. He thanked me. But he did not eat much. Sana said they had already eaten outside. No one told me. I washed the dishes alone that night. Food is not just food for a mother, it is love. That night I felt rejected. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. I began feeling like I was walking on thin glass. One wrong word could break everything. I stopped sharing opinions. Stopped offering advice. Became background noise. One evening, Sana asked me not to sit in the living room while they discussed something. She said it politely. But the message was clear. I was not included. I went to my room and closed the door. I sat there for a long time. Not crying, just sitting. I thought of my younger self. The woman who ran a household alone. The woman who made decisions. Where had she gone? Saad started coming home later. Work. Commitments. I waited for him sometimes. Out of habit. But he did not notice. The waiting stopped. I stopped expecting. Expectations hurt. One night, there was a small disagreement between Sana and me. About something small. She felt I interfered, that I felt misunderstood. Saad listened quietly. Then he said, "Sana is right, Mom. Please don't mind. Please don't mind." Those words felt heavier than anger. That was the first time I felt truly alone. He nodded. I always nodded. That night I did not sleep. I realized something painful. My place in this family was no longer secure. It depended on how little space I took. That fear changed everything. I became careful with my steps, why words, why emotions. But fear makes love small. I started withdrawing. Sana noticed my distance. She asked if I was okay. Said yes, because explaining felt useless. Days passed like that. Polite. Quiet. Distant. The house was peaceful. But peace without connection is empty. I felt myself fading. Sometimes I stood in front of Saad's room, wanting to knock, wanting to talk. But I stopped myself. I did not want to be a burden. One afternoon I overheard Sana say, "Mom doesn't understand our lifestyle." That sentence stayed with me. I understood more than they thought. I understood that I no longer belonged. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. I began planning my days around avoiding discomfort. avoiding conflict, avoiding myself. That is when I knew something was deeply wrong. A mother should not feel like a problem. But I did. And the distance kept growing. Quietly. Relentlessly. There is always a moment when silence can no longer hold everything inside. It does not come with noise. It comes with clarity. For me, that moment arrived on an ordinary day. No special date, no big argument. Just a simple afternoon that changed how I saw everything. It was late afternoon. The house was quiet. Sana was in her room. Saad had not returned from work yet. I was sitting in the living room folding laundry. The same routine. The same quiet. I heard Sana's phone ring. She answered it in the kitchen, her voice soft and comfortable. I was not trying to listen, but walls are thin, and silence carries words far. She was speaking to someone close. Maybe her sister. Maybe her mother. She said, "I'm trying my best, but living with elders is not easy." Froze. She continued, "Mom is not bad, but she doesn't understand boundaries." Boundaries. That word again. Then she said something that settled deep inside my chest. "I just want my own space. I hope Saad understands." I slowly folded the cloth in my hands. I did not feel angered, that I felt tired. Tired of adjusting. Tired of proving that I meant no harm. Tired of shrinking. That was when I realized something important. I had been trying to earn my place in a home where I already belonged. Or so I thought. That evening, Saad came home later than usual. They talked in their room for a long time. I did not ask about it. But later that night, Saad came to me. He sat down across from me, his face serious but calm. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" He nodded. He took a deep breath. "Sana feels uncomfortable sometimes," he said carefully. "She needs more independence." I listened quietly. He continued, "She feels you interfere, even if you don't mean to." Interfere. I had heard that word before. I wanted to explain that I wanted to defend myself. But something stopped me. I asked him one simple question. "Saad," I said softly, "do you think I want to hurt your happiness?" He looked surprised. "No, Mom," he said quickly. "I know you don't." "Then why," I asked, "do I feel like a problem?" He did not answer immediately. Silence filled the space between us. Then he said something that changed everything. "Mom," he said, "things are different now. You need to accept that." Accept. Another soft word. Another heavy meaning. I nodded again. But inside something shifted. I realized that no matter how gently he spoke, the message was clear. This was no longer my home in the way it once was. I went to my room that night and closed the door. I sat on my bed and felt something I had not allowed myself to feel before. Grief. Not for a person, but for a role. I was grieving the loss of being needed. The next few days passed quietly. Too quietly. Sana was polite, Saad was distant. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Then came the moment I will never forget. One afternoon, Sana came into my room. She knocked first. She always knocked. She sat down across from me. Her hands were folded, her voice calm. "Mom," she said, "I hope you don't take this the wrong way." He nodded. She continued, "Sometimes Saad and I need privacy. Just us." I listened. Then she said the sentence that broke something inside me. "Can you please give us some space and stay in your room more?" She said it kindly. She did not raise her voice. But kindness does not soften rejection. I looked at her. For a moment, I saw not my daughter-in-law, but a woman protecting her life. And I understood her. But understanding did not erase the pain. Smiled. That smile cost me everything. "Of course," I said. "You're right." She looked relieved. Thanked me. And she left. I sat there for a long time. I did not cry. I felt empty. That was the moment I understood the truth. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. I had given love, respect, space, silence. And now I was being asked to disappear. That night I packed a small bag. not to leave the house, just to feel some control. I folded my clothes carefully, that I moved my belongings into one corner. I made myself smaller. Sud noticed. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. I smiled again. "I'm adjusting," I said. That word tasted bitter. A few days later, there was a family gathering at a relative's house. Everyone was laughing, talking. Someone asked me how things were at home. Smiled. "They're fine," I said. But inside I felt like screaming. On the way back, Saad and Sanaa sat together in the front seat. I sat in the back, alone. That image stayed with me. I realized I had moved from the center to the edge. Quietly, without protest. That night I finally cried. Not loudly, softly, into my pillow. I cried for the woman I used to be. For the love I gave freely. For the place I lost. I whispered the truth I had avoided for so long. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. That was my turning point. Not because I decided to fight, but because I decided to see. I saw that love cannot survive without respect. That silence does not always keep peace. That disappearing is not the same as adjusting. For the first time I allowed myself to feel the loss fully. And with that pain came a quiet strength. Not anger. Awareness. The next morning I woke up different. Not hopeful, but clear. After that turning point, life did not become dramatic. It did not suddenly change overnight. There was no shouting, no confrontation. Instead, there was a slow, gentle shift. The space opened within me. A quiet room for reflection I had not allowed before. I realized that I had been giving all my energy to a home, to a family, to people I loved deeply. Without caring for myself, I had forgotten that even love has limits. For days, I stayed in my room more often. I did not try to be invisible. I did not try to please. I simply existed. Saad noticed, of course. He came to my room sometimes, and I would smile politely. But I did not offer explanations. I only let my silence speak. One evening, Saad sat on the edge of my bed. His eyes were calm but concerned. "Mom," he said, "I know things have been difficult. I just want you to know that I love you." I nodded and my throat felt tight. I wanted to say something long and emotional, but I didn't. I simply said, "I know, son. I know." He held my hand for a moment and left. No lecture, no advice. Just presence. That small gesture meant more than words. It was a quiet acknowledgement of the distance we had allowed to grow. It was the first step toward understanding. Sanaa noticed too. Not immediately, but she did. One morning, she came to me in the kitchen. I was preparing breakfast as usual. She smiled softly and said, "Mom, I wanted to thank you for all that you do. I know I haven't said it enough." Her voice was genuine. Her eyes were sincere. I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in months. Not because she suddenly changed, but because acknowledgement, even small, has the power to heal. I smiled and said, "Thank you, Sanaa. That means a lot." It was not perfect. We were not suddenly best friends. But it was a start. I began to notice small things changing. Saad started involving me in minor decisions. Not because I demanded it. Not because I interfered. Simply because he realized I was still present, still part of their lives, and still loved him deeply. Sanaa would ask my opinion sometimes, quietly, respectfully. She did not always follow it. And that was fine. The point was that my voice mattered again in small ways. I also learned something crucial. Love does not have to erase the self. Sacrifice does not have to mean disappearing. I began taking care of myself. Not in a selfish way, but in a necessary way. I cooked less often. I rested more. I read books. I took walks. The house felt different when I stopped shrinking. Not because they changed immediately, but because I stood quietly in my own presence. I remember one afternoon sitting by the window. Raindrops tapped gently on the glass. I watched the garden and felt a calm I had not felt in a long time. Saad came to sit beside me. He said nothing at first. Just sat there. Then he said softly, "Mom, I missed this. I missed having you around like this." I smiled a little wistfully. "I never left, son. I was always here." He nodded. That moment was enough. It did not need words. Even Sana began to respect the quiet boundaries I had set. She understood that giving space did not mean erasing me. It meant mutual respect. We started small routines. Sana would call me when she cooked something new. She would share small stories from her day. I listened. I responded with warmth, not fear of being wrong or in the way. Saad and I began talking more openly. Sometimes about life. Sometimes about small memories from his childhood. We laughed softly about silly things. We cried quietly about others. But the important part was connection, slow and gentle. I realized something important during this time. No matter what I gave, it had felt never enough before because I had been giving everything and forgetting myself. I had believed that love is measured by how much you sacrifice. But I learned that love is also measured by how you maintain yourself, by how you set gentle boundaries, by how you allow yourself to exist fully. That realization changed everything. I began to speak more honestly. Not to argue. Not to demand. Simply to share my feelings. One evening I told Saad quietly, "Sometimes I feel invisible even though I am here. I don't want to fight, son. I just want you to see me." He looked at me with understanding. "I see you, Mom. I always have. I just didn't realize how much it hurt." I nodded. No anger, no blame. Only acknowledgement. Sana overheard us talking sometimes. She noticed that I was no longer shrinking, that I was present in my own space, and slowly, her tone softened. We did not become a perfect family overnight. We did not erase months of hurt in a day. But we started seeing each other. Acknowledging each other. Respecting each other's space and presence. I began inviting them to share small parts of my day. Cooking together sometimes. Sitting in the living room for tea, listening to stories. It felt ordinary. And yet, ordinary became extraordinary after months of quiet distance. I realized that resolution does not come from forcing change. It comes from acceptance, gentle boundaries, and honest presence. I forgave, not in a dramatic sense. But silently, within my own heart, I forgave myself for expecting too little cared. I forgave Saad for being busy. I forgave Sana for needing space. And in forgiving I felt lighter. One evening, Saad brought me a cup of tea while I was sitting by the window. Sana joined us. We sat together, quietly, no words at first. Then Saad said, "Mom, thank you for staying. I know things were hard." Sana smiled softly. "Thank you, Mom," she said. I felt warmth spread through me. Not the warmth of being needed endlessly. Not the warmth of sacrifice. The warmth of being seen. That evening I whispered softly to myself, "I gave everything. And now I have learned that it is enough because I am still here. I am still me." And for the first time in months I felt calm. Not perfect. Not complete. But at peace. I understood that love can coexist with boundaries. That family can coexist with respect. That mothers can give and still exist. That night I went to sleep without tears. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had found my place again. Not by shrinking. Not by disappearing, by simply being. No matter what I gave, it had felt like never enough. But now I understood. Giving is not about erasing yourself. It is about loving fully, while also loving yourself enough to stand tall in your own whole life. Slowly return to a gentle rhythm. Not perfect. Not without its challenges, but softer than before. I realize that endings are rarely dramatic. They are quiet. A slow release of tension, letting go that feels like breathing again after holding your breath for too long. In the mornings, I watched the sunlight spill across the floor. I poured my tea and sat by the window. No one rushed me, no one questioned me. I simply existed. And existing felt like a miracle. Saad came to me one morning as he often did now. He held my hands in both of his. "Mom," he said softly. "I know I didn't notice before. I should have." I smiled. It was a quiet smile, not forced. "I know, son," I said. "I only want us to see each other." Sana joined us, carrying a small tray of biscuits. She set it down gently. "Mom," she said with a shy smile, "thank you for your patience." Those words were not dramatic. They were not apologies. They were acknowledgments. And sometimes acknowledgement is all a heart needs. Over the next weeks, I noticed small changes. Saad would ask me my opinion before making decisions. Sana would pause before speaking, considering how her words might affect me. That we learned each other's rhythms again. I started reclaiming my life without guilt. I read books I had put aside. I cooked when I wanted, not when I felt obligated. I laughed more freely. And they laughed with me, not just near me. One afternoon, I was arranging flowers in a vase when Saad came behind me and hugged me from the side. "Mom," he whispered, "I love you. Never forget that." Tears welled up in my eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of relief. Tears of quiet joy that comes from being seen. I realized that love is not only measured by giving endlessly. Love is measured by mutual respect, care, and presence. By acknowledgement, by listening, by allowing each person to exist fully without fear of being erased. Sana came and joined us in the garden that evening. She sat beside me and said softly, "I hope you know, Mom, we need you. Always." Her voice trembled just slightly. I smiled and held her hand gently. "I know, son," I said. "And I need you too." The house felt warmer that night. Not because furniture moved or schedules changed. Not because meals were perfect. But because hearts had shifted. Slowly, quietly. I remembered the countless days I had spent shrinking, fading, giving endlessly without acknowledgement. I remembered the nights of silent tears. The moments of quiet despair when I felt invisible in my own home. And yet here I was. Still here, still me. I realized that giving everything does not always guarantee recognition. But it guarantees integrity. It guarantees love. And sometimes love returns quietly, gently, like dawn after a long night. I began speaking more openly with Saad and Sana. Not to argue. Not to complain. Just to share my thoughts, my feelings, my needs. They listened. Not because they had to. But because they saw me, really saw me. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, I found an old photo album. Photos of Saad as a child. Photos of our family before the distance. Photos of laughter and love. I sat on the floor and turned the pages slowly. Tears blurred my eyes. Not from sadness, from remembrance. From gratitude for the life I had given. For the love I had poured. For the strength I had found within myself. Saad walked in quietly. He sat beside me without a word. We turned the pages together, silently sharing the past, acknowledging the present. Sana joined us after a moment, sitting on the other side. Her presence was gentle, her eyes were warm. In that moment I felt something I had longed for. Belonging. Not as a mother who sacrifices endlessly. Not as a guest in her own home. But as a woman, as a mother, as a person whose love matters. I thought of all the nights I had spent crying silently, of the moments I had questioned myself, of the times I had smiled when my heart broke. And I understood. Those nights were not wasted. They had brought me here to self-respect, to acknowledgement, to quiet peace. I realized that being enough is not about pleasing everyone. It is about loving, giving, and still keeping your own heart whole. I began writing small notes to Saad and Sana. Simple things. Thank you for noticing me today. I appreciate your patience. I love seeing you both happy. And slowly they started writing back. It was not a grand reconciliation. Not a dramatic apology. Just quiet communication. Respect. Love. I began walking around the house with a lighter heart. Cooking when I wanted. Sitting when I wanted. Speaking when I wanted. And for the first time in months, no one made me feel guilty for existing. One evening I looked around the house, the same rooms I had once felt invisible in. The same walls that had seemed so cold. Now they felt warm. Because warmth comes from within. I realized that my role had not disappeared, it had transformed. I was no longer the mother who gave endlessly without recognition. I was the mother who gave, but also existed. Who loved, but also held her own space, who cared, but also knew her worth. That evening, Saad and Sana sat with me by the window. We watched the sunset together. No words were needed. Just presence. And I whispered softly, almost to myself, no matter what I gave, it was never enough. Until I realized that giving everything and keeping myself whole is more than enough. I understood then that life is not about grand gestures. It is about small moments of acknowledgement. About quiet presence. about respect and love. I felt a gentle warmth spread through my heart. Not from anyone's words, not from anyone's actions, from the understanding that I had survived, that I had loved fully, and that I had been seen at last. I let a single tear roll down my cheek, a tear for the past, a tear for the journey, a tear for the quiet strength I had found. I looked at Saad, I looked at Sanad, I smiled. And for the first time I felt complete. Not because the house was perfect. Not because everyone was perfect. But because I had found my place. A place of respect, a place of love, a place where I belonged. I whispered to myself one final time. I gave everything, and that was enough. Not because they said so. Not because they acknowledged it fully. But because I have finally acknowledged myself. The house was quiet. The sky was soft with twilight. The wind carried the gentle scent of flowers from the garden. And I felt peace, calm, acceptance, hope. Because endings are not always about closure. Sometimes they are about presence. About standing tall in your own life, quietly, lovingly, and fully. I had been invisible once, I had felt small, I had doubted myself. But I had learned the most important lesson of all. No matter what I gave, it was never enough. Until I gave myself enough to matter. And that was more than enough.